Good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining my live stream this evening. The Gremlins were with us there earlier, so apologies about the slight delay in joining you this evening. So tonight we're going to be discussing the ongoing decimation of our national sovereignty, and we're going to be looking in particular at events on the continent this week, in particular a plan being hatched between Merkel and Macron, which will basically be an attempt to try and undermine individual, independent national sovereignty of nations even more. We're going to discuss that. And we're also going to be looking at the fight back by Italy and Poland in particular. Italy has said that it is going to lead a new renaissance where European values will be brought back to the heart of Europe, and this is all very encouraging given that the original Renaissance began in Italy. They know how to do a Renaissance, so maybe Europe's future and our individual identities as nation states will be protected as a result of what is being suggested by the new Italian government. So I'm delighted to be joined this evening by John Waters. Both John and I feel very strongly about what is happening to Ireland, and we have decided to do more regular broadcasts on this subject. We're doing it because we want people to waken up to the reality of what is going on in relation to mass immigration into our country, which is going to destroy our welfare state, what we have built up, what generations of our forefathers have built up, and looking at the pressures that are on infrastructures in relation to health, housing, etc., and how migration plays a part. But also we're going to be looking at the bigger plan that globalists have, and this is a key debate that we need to have as a country. John, how would you like to start this conversation this evening? Good evening.
Good evening, Gemma. Well, it's been an odd week in ways. I mean, we can't forget to talk about Alexander Ruz-Matovich, Bekirmiov, or whatever we call him. We used to have terrorists or people called Medlinchi and O'Hare and guys like that. Now we have to deal with guys like Bekmirviev or something like that, you know.
But John, he's an Irish citizen.
I do beg your pardon, Gemma. Of course he is. Just as I am. We are all Irish citizens now. Everybody's an Irish citizen, it seems. There's no limits to the number of Irish citizens that we can take. Our island, you know, it's an amazing thing, you know. I remember, I'm old enough to remember that when the first Brian Lenihan, the father of the man who died, had tragically from cancer there a few years ago, the Minister of Finance, his father was also called Brian. I'm speaking now for our younger viewers. And he once made a famous remark, you know, where people were complaining about people leaving Ireland. And he says, we can't all expect to live on one small island. Well, it seems now we can. Everybody can expect to live on this small island, it seems. Really. So, you know, I found that episode with that guy, this jihadist who was arrested abroad. And then the teacher comes in and he makes a very, very strange statement, where he says, you know, you expect the Taoiseach to condemn the man's use of his Irish citizenship to get around the world and to drag our name into disrepute. Instead, this Taoiseach informs the Irish people that every Irish citizen is entitled to consular protection and advice around the world. You know, well, that would exclude, of course, fathers seeking to have their children who have been abducted by their mothers to restore to Ireland, to the country of their lawful jurisdiction, because I can tell you the names of at least 30 or 40 such men over the years who have sought consular assistance and all kinds of assistance as they are entitled to by the Department of Justice, and they were left swinging in the wind. So, you know, that's what that means.
Well, this particular individual, who the Gardaí very publicly, and the Gardaí, you know, they come out with such crazy statements every single day, like they're a laughing stock, really. But, you know, they came out with this statement that this was a serious player in ISIS. Right. Yeah. Well, if he was a serious player, why the heck wasn't he arrested? Why wasn't he in prison? I mean, because they have no evidence, of course. But
was he made
how did he get his citizenship?
Yeah, was he made an Irish citizen before they realised he was a terrorist or afterwards? That would be an interesting question for the Gardaí to answer. If the Commissioner is in the mood to come out and speak to the people of Ireland about his responsibilities towards them. You know, there's so many things that we don't know about. We're not permitted. The only voice that I saw criticising Leo Varadkar's statement was a member of the Muslim, the head, I think, of the Muslim Peace and whatever, Reconciliation Council or something like that. So the only people who now can make any kind of a negative comment about Islamism in Ireland is a Muslim. We Irish are paralysed. We cannot speak the truth, even though we have put, as Dave Cullen recently pointed out to me, and I'd missed this, we've put giant flower pots at the top of Grafton Street, our leading shopping thoroughfare, Ireland's leading shopping thoroughfare. There are giant, if you look at them, if you go there are giant flower pots, and they are there precisely to stop lorries being driven down at speed down Grafton Street. And yet they will not tell us what they are for, and they will not talk to us about the threat that they know to exist in our country and everywhere else now. And still they insist that we must suck it up in relation to opening our borders, and for fear of being called racists and Nazis and all this absolute gibberish that comes out of the mouths of their willing, their useful idiots and their shills and their mouthpieces. So this is really serious, like, you know what I mean? This is not a joke. This is not a game. We are in deep peril in our country in all kinds of ways, and the people who are supposed to take care of the Irish people are not doing their jobs. They are doing a job which is, I would say, close to treason in terms of what their priorities are, where they are promising us that they will increase the population of Ireland by 1 million within about 20 years or so, and without any regard for what that may mean for the future of this country, without any regard whatsoever. And of course, the media go along with it all. They refuse to create a platform that the Irish people can speak about these things, can express their fears and their worries, their anxieties about real and valid anxieties. They cannot speak them, because they are being refused the right to access to the platform which is there for that purpose. And that means to me that people in the Irish Times, the Irish Independent, the Examiner, RT should just simply resign, should step down. They should remove themselves and allow people who are prepared to do the job of providing a platform for Irish conversations to step in and take over.
Yeah, I mean, look, we know that the mainstream media are keeping the Irish people in the dark. We've had this conversation so many times. Ireland is the softest touch of all. I've been making this point that our strategic, the value of Ireland to those forces of globalism cannot be underestimated. And, I know we see ourselves as a little blob out in the Atlantic, and, we think we're so great, but we really know deep down, because we have this narcissistic tendency, really deep down, we're very, very insecure as a nation. And I think there is a sense that we can avoid all of this, it could never happen in Ireland. We could never have bloodshed on the streets of Ireland, along the lines of what is happening in Sweden every single night and day of the week. People should just look at Sweden, see what they've done to their country. Sweden is finished.
Yes.
I would, as a woman, I would not go to Sweden now. It's something like 1 in 3 women say they have been sexually assaulted in Sweden because of what they have allowed to do with open borders. This is the reality. Ireland is going to suffer the most because we have turned a blind eye to it. We have been soft. We have not stood up for our sovereignty and said, sorry, we are not able to cope. We cannot cope with the housing crisis. We cannot cope with the crisis in health. And we cannot cope with mass immigration.
You're so right, Gemma. I mean, I think there's a few points that we really need to zero in on, and it's not so much statistics, or there's a lot of them about. I mean, there's a lot of stuff, good stuff that people can look at online. people who have done really good work. There's a website called Parse the Noise, which has done great breakdowns of all this stuff, and people really should go on there and look at what's there. All the facts are laid out for people very clearly, unemotively. But we need to zero in on some of the factors, and you've touched on something very important there, the attitude of Irish people, the complacency that has entered in. You're dead right. They have no sense that this could be happening, that it could be happening. Not that it is or isn't happening. They think it couldn't happen because they would think the people that we have elected to lead us would alert us because that's their job, or the guards would be alerting us, or the judiciary. These people would be telling us, warning, and they're not because they're all in on the scam. The scam is a vital part of their survival in office, is the point. So they're not telling us.
Yeah.
And their game is to clock up a couple more years, as many more years as they can in safety, get their pensions, which they hope will still be there to be got, and get the hell out and disappear so people won't even know where they are. Now, that's what's happening there. But people need to understand that we grew up in this country and we had relative stability for many years, leaving aside the troubles in the north, which, in the Republic didn't impinge all that much. Occasionally, of course, in the Dublin Monaghan bombings and so on. But in general, they were as though somewhere else. Most Irish people didn't go up across the border. I did because I worked with a band as a roadie for many years, and we were one of the few bands that went up in the 70s and in the 80s. Continue because most of the members of the band, the freshmen, were from the north, and we continued to go up there. And I know a little bit about what it was like up there then. But most people in the Republic don't know. Really, they've had no personal experience of this kind of thing. And what we're facing potentially is far, far worse. We need to understand that. Because, once this has happened, what happened in Manchester, what happened in Paris, what happened in Madrid, all these things will become probably commonplace. Now, and that's just one aspect. There are many things we need to focus on to understand what it is that's going on. And I want to first of all say something about this because I didn't see this coming, I have to say. People call you names and all that. I want to just tell you a little bit about my own kind of history in this issue of people coming from other countries. In 2004, we had a referendum in Ireland called the citizenship referendum, the purpose of which was the government wanted to close off a loophole whereby babies that were born here were entitled to citizenship. And people were coming here from foreign jurisdictions, from Africa mainly, and having their babies in Irish hospitals. And then the whole family or the parents would be entitled to come and stay here. And the government of the time, Fianna Fáil PD government, saw this as a kind of a scam.
Which it was.
Well, let me just let's not judge it for the moment, because there's something important I want to say about my position. Because I was actually on the other side. Now, that referendum was passed by 79% to 21%. I actually wrote several times in my column in the Irish Times, and I was on the media. Actually, it was somebody on the other side who reminded me recently that we were at loggerheads in that debate. I had forgotten. And I took the position that time in 2004, which is 14 years ago, that I have a strong belief in the natural family and the right of parents and children to be protected in their natural relationships. So it offended my sense of that people would be trying to stop parents from coming to look after their children, or to break that was the thing that really was exercising them. And I felt also that if Ireland was allowing people in under whatever circumstances at all, then it didn't really have the right to just kick them out unceremoniously. The point is, you have to protect your border. And when we weren't protecting our borders, the responsibility lay with us. However, for all those kind of reasons, but the most important thing that needs to be said is, I didn't see then what I see now. I had no idea that they were going to basically open up our borders up completely. And in fact, the political cadre of the time, the politicians of the time, did not want to do that, clearly, or they would not have run this referendum. They were trying to stop it. And that's very interesting. That's only 14 years ago. They were trying to close our borders. Now, the political class is trying to open them. So sometime in between those 14 years, something dramatic has happened in relation to political leadership in this country. Well, what is it? Well, It's clear. It seems to be clear that it's actually to do with the collapse of the economy in 2008. That basically that we became so vulnerable that we lost all right to be independent, or to say no, or to question anything that we were asked to do by our political overlords in Europe. And basically, that's now what we're at the mercy of. That in order to survive at all, these guys, the Varadkars and the Coveney's and these people, they know they won't survive at all. They won't be allowed to survive for 10 minutes unless they do everything they're told. And that's what the unfortunate situation. Now, let's put a little bit of context on this, because, you know, people don't really understand. You know, they think it's just people coming here, refugees. It's not. It's not in the normal sense. These are not asylum seekers by and large. They're economic refugees is a phrase. Well, there's something somewhat more than that. There's a context. And that context is something like this, that in the last 20 to 30 years, the population of Africa has absolutely exploded. Like, it's in some countries, it has doubled in the last, since, for example, Ethiopia. The population of Ethiopia, which was in grave peril in 1984, and we all contributed a Band-Aid in that year. Since then, the population of Ethiopia has doubled. And the population of lots of other African countries have doubled or more in the same period. And the fertility rate in these countries in Africa is something like 3 times in most countries what ours is currently. Ours is now about 1.8. There are countries in Africa now where it's 5.5, 6, 7, 8. The fertility rate. So they're moving ahead. So this is the context that, and there are lots of other elements we need to look at. Like, we're just after introducing abortion, Gemma, as you know. Well, abortion is the factor that most rapidly escalates or de-escalates the population of a country. In other words, we are actually now entering the next phase, which is basically not just surrendering ourselves to the whatever death of passion or desire has afflicted Western countries without abortion is multiplied by it. And this is now going to happen to us. So that we are actually cancelling ourselves in history, from history. The people of Europe, all right across Europe, the replacement rate, the fertility rate is like down in the 1.6, 1.3 in the case of Italy. This is why people like Matteo Salvini have stepped up and have been required, by the people. Salvini is called by the moment, by Italy, by history, to do what is necessary now to save his country if he can. And I don't know that he can, because it's getting very late in the day. And we do not have a Salvini in Ireland right now. We need to find one real fast. So this is a dramatic moment. It's not like, just people coming here. This is actually a shift in the world where white Europeans will actually, at the current rate, will cease to exist within 50 years. Really. They will virtually...
the figures suggest that the Irish, ethnic Irish people will be a minority in Ireland. I'd say we are talking 15 years. If the figures at the moment, 20% of the population is migrant, is non-national. So and that's what they're the sort of official figures, which I never trust. So
Ireland will become, in effect, a province of Africa or something like that. That's essentially where we're going. And I don't mean politically, I mean culturally. This is very important, because part of the complacency that you touched on earlier is this idea that Ireland has always existed, and we've had terrible times and terrible travails and struggles for 800 years, but we survived, and this time I think could be different, because it's a very different phenomenon that's happening. And it's, if you actually think about it this way, go forward those 30, 40 years, and if the people like Varadkar and Coveney have their way, and they're followed by more people of the same ilk, well, where will we be? We'll be gone, perhaps. I'll be gone. But will there be people in Ireland, in Dublin, or any other Irish town or city, at that point, Irish people, regretting even what happened to their country? Now, this is the question. Will there be people to regret what's happened? Will there be any Irish people per se who will remember what Ireland was? Who will actually be able to sing an Irish song, to speak a sentence in the Irish language, to remember who Pádraig Pearse was? Will there be any of that? I doubt it very much if these people have their way and we don't stop them now, because we have one last chance, just as right across the world. I mean, if you actually look at what is happening now with the yellow vests in Europe and Trump in America, who will meet the absolute, distaste of the so-called media. Those movements, they're the last ditch attempt of a class of people who have been marginalized and ignored. And they're the people who worked in the real economy, who were in many cases made obsolescent, and who watched their cultures being taken from them, and their young people being sucked up into this radical ideology, which is going to destroy those young people and their children, and mean that there will be no life. And ultimately, what we're talking about is the loss of a home. And it will be a little bit like this. I've recently sold my house. It's in the process of selling, and I feel very sad about it, because I had a little cottage in Dalkey that I bought when I about 30 years ago, 28 or 30 years ago. I'm very sad about it, and I know that there will come a time in the next few months when I will drive up there and pass by it, and I will wonder what's it like inside, what's going on there, because I will still have that attachment to my home that I had a home for nearly 30 years. And that's a bit like what we're facing as a people, that our home is being sold from under our feet. It's like it's being possessed by a bank and is being sold without our permission. And the new people are coming not just to look at it, but actually to start moving in and moving their furniture in. Can you imagine that people are coming and they're moving, they're pushing you out of the way in your own hallway and telling you, we need to bring our beds in, we need to bring our chairs in. This is where we are. This is our home has been taken. You see, these people who come here, with all due respect to them, and as I said, I spoke before in defense of people's right to come. And I think I was wrong. I was more wrong than right now. History reveals me as being wrong. But the thing about those people, Gemma, is they have homes already. This is not their home. They're coming here for other reasons. They can always go back to Africa if they want to, if they feel homesick or lonely.
But we have to spell out.
We will have no home. We will no longer have a home when they are here, when they are living in our country and calling it their own. That's where we're going.
We have to spell out the reasons why they're coming. They are given very good preferential treatment because we are obliged to do that, and they get access to social housing in the same way that citizens do. We know that 1 in 3 social housing units goes to a non-national. They get benefits that they could never dream of getting in the third world, and who is to blame them for coming here?
Oh, I don't blame them.
But I accept that when they come here, it's not really what they thought it was going to be. And this is why many migrants are very ghettoized. They're not integrating, because the government, unlike countries like Denmark and other countries, do not ensure that they do integrate. So they're ghettoized. You go into the courts any day of the week and you will see our migration situation, the reality of it. I would encourage anyone to go in to the criminal courts of justice any day of the week, and you will see it there. You will see the reality of migration in Ireland, the reality of multicultural Ireland. It is not working. I will continue to say that. So they are offered perks beyond their wildest imagination. Now, we have to decide as a people who live in the first world. We live in the first world because our ancestors worked hard, built up this country to a point where we have what we would call first world standards. Now they're dropping by the day. I don't think Ireland, aspects of the health service now are third world. There's no question about that. Aspects of our transport system are second world. Some of the way, the roads, the motorway system at times it's second, third world. So we are losing our status as a first world country. That means we are losing what we built up as a nation, as a people, what our ancestors fought for.
Yes.
That we would have a certain standard of living. Now, are we prepared as a people to say we are giving all of that up and allowing our population to soar into the 10s, 20 million, 65 million is what the European Union plans for Ireland, 65 million. Do we want this as a people? If we do, say it. Let's say it. Do we want to become a third world nation? That's where we're heading.
Well, yeah, what you refer to there, Jim, as you know, was a very, very catchily titled study that was done on behalf of the European Union there a few years ago, in 2010. It's called Study on the Feasibility of Establishing a Mechanism for the Relocation of Beneficiaries of International Protection. That's the name of the survey. And they said that the objective of that survey was to identify places who could take the migrants that essentially certain countries didn't want anymore. Germany, France, Belgium, the United Kingdom, and Sweden. Those 5 countries were the ones who would end up with minus migrants as a result of that, and the rest of Europe would end up with an awful lot more. And that's essentially what that study was about, trying to identify places. And they ended up saying that we would have capacity to absorb to have a population of 65 million. I think the exact figure is 65,687,474 people. Now, during the 1980s, we were members of the EU. We were a member of the EU, and we were hemorrhaging our population. And basically, we were told to suck it up, that we couldn't all expect to live on one small island, as it were. Now they're telling us that we could have had 65 million of us and we would have been able to live. Well, why didn't they tell us that then? You know, this is absolutely bonkers. This is completely bonkers. This is a thing, Gemma, I really need to say another point that we need to get across to people, because they're struggling to articulate this, and I am struggling to articulate this, and you are. There are no words to describe what is happening. Lunacy doesn't get it. It doesn't get it, because, you know, my father would meet his friends in the street when I was a kid and going around with him, and he'd say, the country's gone mad. He said, it hadn't really. It was just, but now you say that, so it doesn't have the traction it needs. There are no words, I mean, to describe. I can only inarticulately bang the table to people. Wake up before it's too late. Because it's almost like now I feel as if I've been parachuted down into the middle of Russia and I don't have a word of Russian. I'm required to explain myself to the people I meet. That's how foreign what's happening is. It is absolutely inconceivable that our political leaders would sell Ireland out in the manner that appears to be happening now. Even there's a part of me that is reserving that absolute accusation, because I think I can't believe that Leo Varadkar is doing this. Yeah. I can't believe that Simon Coveney is doing this, but they appear to be doing it. And they appear to be quite happy about doing it and proud of themselves. They're destroying Ireland. I mean, this is treachery by any evaluation, because Ireland, when they're finished, Ireland will not exist in any meaningful sense.
Well, I mean, if we lived in a democracy, Leo Varadkar would be arrested tonight for treason against the Irish people, the Irish nation, the Irish state. He should be arrested for what he has done to our country.
You see, there's a very interesting psychological study to be done on people like that. I think, again, there's a syndrome that besets them. He doesn't think this is real. It's, you know, when you see the way he thinks he's in a soap opera, because when Justin Trudeau comes here, they all put on their colourful socks and they go out for a jog in the park, and they're filmed by the cameras and they're smirking and smiling there, and they're all beautifully toned and all this, you know, and groomed. That's what they think it is going on. This is all like the plot of a soap opera.
They're just puppets. These are not real. They're not. I don't think they're real people. I mean, they were put into these jobs by the elite, the banking elite, whoever they are. You know, the Bilderbergs, the Rothschilds. But they are pure puppets. I mean, are they? I don't think they're real. They're not real human beings. Varadkar does not have any love or compassion for his people. He does not care about his country. I have never seen any evidence that he cares about this country. I remember him saying during when the whistleblower controversy emerged, and he came out with this comment about whistleblowers being distinguished and not disgusting. And I thought maybe at that point, that was the beginning and end of any empathy that he has shown. He has no concern or care for his country.
I'd have to say the evidence indicates that you're completely right. And I mean, there's a worrying aspect to all this as well. That one of the things that happens when you see the levels of fertility rate in Europe, those figures, when they start to go into the doldrums like that, it bespeaks a kind of in a certain sense, a loss of desire by people. And that's really an established political syndrome where people are, there he's ringing you now, Gemma.
My apologies.
It's Leo. He's going to tell you off. We're here in this situation where it's unreal, and you have to ask yourself, what kind of psychological profile are we dealing with in these guys? When you look at the profile of look at the replacement rate, what's called a replacement rate, the fertility rate, 1.8. And we'll go down to maybe the same as Italy is currently. Italy is working on theirs because they're bringing in policies to incentivize people to have more children. But the problem is when people as a society stop having children as a society, the desire even gets weaker. And then you start electing politicians who, interestingly, right across Europe, don't have families. And what happens then is you get to thinking that is not transcendent. In the sense, I don't mean in the religious sense, I mean transcendent in the sense that we can transcend what is present. I mean, part of what we all do for each other and for our friends and neighbors and our families and our children, our daughters and sons and our nieces and nephews and all that, we continue to work as though we were going to live forever because we want our children to have a safe and good place to live in. These people don't have that instinct. This is the fundamental problem. You're not allowed to say it. I remember a woman in the Conservative Party elections there a few years ago. God, I forget her name now, but she said something about Theresa May, and she got into huge trouble. But she was actually right, not in the personal sense, of course, because it's not a personal thing. It's a phenomenon that is actually quite extraordinary. When you look at the leaders, these guys, Macron, May, Radker, you could go on. There's several more of these people, and they don't have families. So why would they, in general, when they get together to talk about the future, have that fire in the belly that we would have, thinking in the way that parents and grandparents and uncles and aunts and all those people who really care about that, why would they have that on their agenda at all? They wouldn't, and they don't. And this is another factor. So, and that will continue. That will de-escalate once the replacement rate starts to slump even more.
This was a policy brought in through Brussels to ensure that fertility rates declined. When austerity was introduced, Western European women, made decisions about their fertility rates. And in many cases, it was because of financial reasons. They saw that it was not feasible to raise a large family or 3 or 4. It just was not practical. You could not buy a home comfortably and have 3 or 4 children. Some women made a decision to have no children because they were frightened that they would not be able to pay a mortgage and raise their children. And that's the reality for many women of my generation and younger. And this was part of the plan, the overall plan of the European Union, which I believe was devised. It is a continuation of Nazi Germany. I think this is the Germanification of Europe. The Nazis never went away. And what they are doing in terms of bringing in migrants from Africa and the Third World, they are creating a labor force of slaves because they know that people from the Third World will not demand the same standards that we are accustomed to in the First World. It's not because they give a damn about people in the third world, it is because they want to create their army of slave labor. So for people need to understand that, John.
Well, they do. And people need to actually start to think their way into if they can at all, into the mindset behind this, and to come to understand that these people now, it is quite evident, have none of the attachment to the idea of Ireland or the people of Ireland that politicians of the past, however weak and poor they were, had, even in the relatively recent past. Like that, they to look at them, you have to realize this. They don't see anything to be gained. They're kind of like, so what if Ireland isn't any longer like it is now? So what if there are no white people left in Ireland? So what if whatever? So what? So what? So what? This is the so whaters. And you get that a lot in journalism as well. I know a lot of so whaters in journalism, who just dismiss any criticism of or questioning of this. What's happening as, oh, well, sure, look, it doesn't matter what color we are. It doesn't matter who we are. It doesn't matter. Anything doesn't matter. Anything goes. And that's the kind of relativism of the postmodern ideology, which has infected everything now in our culture publicly. Our universities, our media, the whole lot. Our arts, our literature. I mean, there isn't a single artist that I can name, a single writer in Ireland who is not infected with this disease. Not one.
No.
Which actually leads you to believe that to actually know for sure that their books, their work are deeply suspect, will not survive, should not survive, but cannot survive. And indeed, how would they survive anyway? Because there would be nobody left to read them. There will no longer be a receptive audience for Irish literature in Ireland when this happens. This is another thing, because Ireland will no longer be Ireland. It will no longer. They may even change the name, Gemma. It's not impossible that in 30 years' time there will be so few Irish people as such in Ireland that the people will have a referendum, whoever they are, and vote a new name into this country, this island, and call it some part of something else.
Yeah, I mean, I think tonight we are trying to stress the urgency of what's happening. I mean, we are down to years. We are down to years before we say goodbye to the Ireland that we love.
Yeah.
I would say to people, to people who are still asleep at the wheel on this, people who are watching RTE News, who are allowing themselves to be brainwashed by the mainstream media, who sit down and listen to Joe Duffy every day and swallow it up and allow themselves to be dumbed down. You know these people. We all know them. Thankfully, we've nearly 600 people watching this live stream now, and thank you to everyone who is joining. And look, let's just say this is not about you and me being journalists, both of us ostracized and removed from our jobs because we believed we were speaking our truths. This is not about journalism for either of us. This is about our genuine concerns for the future of our country. So you can call it whatever you want, a political broadcast, whatever you want. But all of you watching this evening, hopefully are watching out of the same concern that John and I have for Ireland. Now, I would say to you watching that there are things that you can do to awaken. There is a huge awakening going on, John, at the moment, because I know it, because every morning when I switch on my computer, my email is full. And I am so grateful to all of you who've contacted me. I have not replied to you, but I am so grateful for the words that you say to me to encourage me on this journey, and all of us who are now speaking the truth about the future of Ireland. I am getting emails every single day from every corner of this planet from Irish people who love Ireland, who love their country that they had to leave. And they are saying, don't stop, please. I see it. I was home last Christmas. I was home during the summer. I brought my children. It's not Ireland anymore. You're going to lose it. You have to keep saying this. I went to Birmingham a couple of years ago, and I've said this before, John, to me, it was one of the most awakening. I mean, I spend a lot of time in the UK. I know it very, very well, but I actually was not aware of what was really going on there. But I went to Birmingham. I went on a story to a part of Birmingham that was Irish about 30 years ago. It was the Irish suburb. And when I asked for directions, because I was looking for an Irish, just particular group of people that lived there, the person I asked laughed at me, and they said, "No, that's not Irish anymore. That's now Muslim." And I said, "No, it couldn't be Muslim. Don't be ridiculous." And I went there, and every single street that I walked down, I was the only woman not wearing a burqa. Not Arabic was being spoken throughout. I could not hear any English. And I could not believe my eyes. Now, if people are not awake, take a short flight over to Birmingham. It's only less than an hour away. Go to these suburbs, which are no-go zones for British people now. Go to parts of London and you will see it. Ireland is not going to be any different. The only difference is that all of Ireland, there will be nothing left of Ireland. And that is the reality. Is that what we want? Because if we don't want it as a people, we have to say it now and stand up.
Yes, and I think we need to look at our thinking as a people, collectively and individually. Because I think what you said there in relation to Islam, there's a factor which we need to look at a bit more closely, and that is the backlash against Catholicism in Ireland, which I think may actually be causing people to actually become indifferent to the insurgence of Muslims and Islamists into Ireland. That in a certain sense, it's like, well, they're a better religion. I actually was at a meeting of, I didn't infiltrate, I just walked into a meeting of Atheist Ireland one time, with a friend, and sat in the front row and listened to all this gibberish they were talking, and there was one particular person whom I won't name tonight, but he was a well-known journalist and figure in Irish life, and he was an atheist. And he stood up and said that, that atheists need to get together with good Muslims against Catholics. Well, that's kind of what I think, that's a mentality that's the heart of the complacency that you're talking about. It's like, oh, well, sure, look, they're nice people, and, they don't abuse children and whatever, and that's not logic. Like, that's disastrous thinking, because there is no rule, there is no way that a culture can remain indefinitely either Christian or secular when there are huge numbers of Muslims in it. It changes because they are more determined than any Christian or any secularist.
Well, I think what people need to understand is that Islam is a political ideology. Christianity is a philosophy, in my opinion. I can see no better philosophy. Love thy enemy, forgiveness, repentance, trying to do the right thing. But that's just my own belief.
Okay, that's fine. That's fine, Gemma. But I would caution about that a little bit, because that's an element that could be part of our suicide also. Love thine enemy, because I say to people, you just have to start waking up. I mean, you can pray platitudes and say they're all God's children and all that, and they are fine. Yes, if you want to think like that, but I say I have to speak this truth now, because I have a daughter, I have step-grandchildren, a step-grandchild, a girl and a boy, and I'm 63 years of age. My life is well 3/4 done, right? And I need to do everything I can to ensure that the country that I got, that was relatively safe and good, that I was able to live a life in, that I give that back to those children in reasonably good shape. And I ask my fellow countrymen and women no more than that they join me in that. Because this is real. And it'll be too late. When the knife is at your neck, it'll be too late.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Well, I mean, but the point I'm trying to make is that, John, that, for Muslims, and, I'm not talking necessarily about moderate Muslims, but I don't think the ideology has much time for moderate Muslims.
No, it doesn't.
It is a political ideology. It is about creating states that are Islamic. Christianity, in its current form, does not do that.
Yes, well,
and it is a peaceful religion. Now, I'm not saying that the architect of Christianity was in anyone somebody who could be pushed around, and there's plenty of evidence of that. We have to stand up against injustice, etc. If one is to be a Christian, but it's so sad what has happened to Ireland.
Well,
That everything was thrown out. Everything that was good about the country was thrown out. And we wonder why people are so in need now. Suicide rates are so high. People think they can go from one Hallmark festival to the next and that they will get sustenance out of this. They're crying out for something with more meaning in it, and they can't get it because they've thrown away the one thing that would have given them that sustenance.
Let me just address this issue of because people constantly feel they have to equivocate. It's like you begin every sentence by saying, "I'm not a racist," and then you go on and make your point. Like, I'm not saying all Muslims are part of Islamism, but and to make the point, I want to quote the one person that I know of who actually took on the Taoiseach in the last few days, and that's a man called Sheikh Umar Al-Qadri, who is a member of the Irish Muslim Peace and Integration Council, and he said that the rest of this man, this jihadist, should initiate a debate on the policies of awarding citizenship to such people. Now, I totally agree with him. But our people, our politicians, Micheál Martin should be saying that. Yeah, I'm not saying that.
Yeah, well, I'm not sure about that, man. I think there's more to that. I think that's just a little sort of a sop to, let's just pretend we're upset about it.
No, I'm not saying it is or isn't. I'm
just
saying that in terms of what we see in front of us, and we see as we find, we speak as we find to some extent. Of course, we can have different. There's lots of subterranean elements here in all this, but I'm just saying that the optics of our public debate, even that's the only voice coming out to talk about this, is ominous in itself. That we can only speak about to the extent that we're permitted to do so by Muslim opinion, is the point I'm making. Now, that's a very, very dangerous situation to be in. And whether there are good Muslims or not, and I'm sure there are, but the point is they have very little to say about the hardliners. Very little.
Very little. And when an Irish teacher was slaughtered in France before Christmas, I don't by an Islamist extremist. I don't remember Varadkar speaking out about the dangers of radical Islam then, when an Irish citizen, not unlike the Belarus man who was captured in Syria.
Leo Varadkar used his office, the office of Taoiseach, unprecedentedly to attack Kevin Myers when he was lying virtually dead on the ground, having been attacked by a mob and finished off and lost his livelihood. Leo Varadkar used the office of Taoiseach to bayonet him to death.
Mm-hmm.
He has nothing to say about these guys. Why? What kind of prioritizing is that? What kind of use of the office of Taoiseach is that? What kind of man is it that inhabits this word, that stands under the word Taoiseach, chieftain of Ireland now?
Mm.
I shudder to think that he is the person who is our leader in these perilous times.
Yes, and just getting back to the let's call it an invasion, because that's what it is. The development of the construction of some of these super mosques that is going up around the country. There's one in Blanchardstown. I've spoken about it before. Now, I have tried to get to the bottom of who is funding this particular 4-story mosque in Blanchardstown. And, you just don't get answers. The website that was hosting I think it's called the Shahuda Foundation of Ireland. These are the people who are behind this mosque. That website seems to no longer exist, but there is currently a Muslim school on that site where Christianity is not taught. It's not taught. So we need to really, really start speaking out about this. I think the most popular boy's name in London now is Muhammad. I think I'm right in saying that. I don't know if that is. That is.
Gemma, there are also other subtle signs already, and this is part of, this kind of fake progressiveness that people have been inculcated with. Irish people, a lot of people think, oh, I'm progressive. We're a great progressive nation. Give an example. A friend of mine, I think it was about Christmas Eve, I met a friend in town in Dublin, and we went into a certain hotel, and in the lobby there was, what looked as again like a crib, some kind of crib construction, like in the European style, the way that the European, in Italy, they have this tradition of building huge cribs, and they build the whole village around the crib. It looked like one of those. So we stood over it and looked. And we looked at the buildings and the roofs and the trees and the animals and the little roadways, and they were beautifully done. Snow on the top. There was no crib in it. There was no crib at the heart of it. It was just this. Everything else. I said, not a crib. That's the name of it. Not a crib. And that's what Ireland is now. Not Christian. Not unchristian, just not Christian. And that is a great, a resounding invitation to people to the Islamist extremists who know what they're dealing with, who are ingenious in these matters, and who have targeted Ireland as a soft touch, as you said earlier, as a country that no longer knows what it believes in, if it believes in anything collectively, because we wouldn't know from listening to RTE or watching RTE if we believed in anything. I mean, again, the abortion thing, it's quite shocking that at the stage that we're at the very moment when we're at the most grave peril in terms of the loss of our own population and the invasion from outside, as you say, that we would then seek to accelerate and escalate the matter by bringing in abortion, as if we can't kill ourselves quickly enough to suit ourselves. There are so many things, and you mentioned earlier, there's so many about the health service, and I don't want to go into this too much, but I had an experience recently where I came across a family who had lost a loved one, and they were convinced, and I am convinced from having spoken to them, that their relative was in effect bumped off in an Irish hospital by being speeded on his way by so-called medical procedures. And what we're looking at in this country now, one of the factors that we need to start reflecting on as a people, in the wake of particularly of the abortion referendum, is that the belief in the absolute nature of life, in the absolute protection of life, and the right to life, is weakening in our culture. It's part of that loss of desire that I was talking about. And so you look at the scenarios coming up now, with all of these people coming from outside, much younger than we would be, a health service no longer capable of actually doing what it's there for, and you end up in an Irish hospital, and you maybe have a 50-50 chance of living for a year or another year or two. How long do you think you're going to last in that hospital if this culture continues to escalate at the rate it's escalating now? I really think people need to stop and ask themselves and purge themselves of all the bullshit they've been listening to from these progressive politicians, so-called progressive politicians. These people care nothing for progress. They care nothing for Ireland. They care nothing for the Irish people, or indeed for any people, black or white. They care only for their own careers and doing what their masters are telling them to do. They don't have any consciences left. They have no conscience about what they're doing to Ireland. They want their pensions, nothing else.
Without a doubt. There's I know you're very fond of a person on social media. Amazing Polly is her.
Yeah.
She's actually going to come on my live stream hopefully next week. And really, I would encourage anyone who is confused about what is happening to look at her videos on YouTube. Amazing Polly, and she is amazing because she is extremely analytical in her research. And if you're confused about what globalism is all about, she is the person to watch. John, you'd agree? I mean, her insights.
She feels it. She feels it, and she lives it. She speaks from her heart all the time. So she doesn't know what she's going to say. She knows roughly what she wants to tell us, but she doesn't know what's going to come out because she feels it, and she sometimes she gets very emotional about it, and watching her, you will too, when you realize what she's saying and how much it affects you and your children also. We need to listen to people like this. She's an amazing person.
She's amazing. She is Canadian, but I mean, one of her tweets today, you know, I mean, she said it as it is. Euthanasia is killing people. Abortion is killing people. There are only two sexes. Kids cannot decide their gender. CO2 is not a pollutant. Carbon taxes will only impoverish the middle and lower classes. Countries need borders. No race is special. Globalism is fascism. And she sums it all up so perfectly. And these are the realities. These are the facts that we should not be afraid to speak.
Can I say this to Gemma? I mean, it's so important that people, because we're so mesmerized by all this bullshit talk about left, this far right, this, and you know, white supremacist this. This is what we're trying to say, and what Polly is saying, is to articulate what is no more or no less than common sense. The thing that our parents had, the thing that our grandparents had, that we respond to reality as we experience it. I'm not spouting ideology. I'm not taking any left or right position. I'm simply saying, as a human being, and I'm not a journalist. You're right. What you said earlier, I'm not a journalist anymore. And even if it was, I'm not in the slightest bit of journalist. I'm a man, a human being, a father, a writer, a voice of the conscience of Ireland, to the extent that I'm permitted by the Irish people to do that. And that's what we need to listen to now. To hear people come back and speak. And so that all of our voices can rise up against this evil, because evil it is. These people are trying to destroy our home, our national home, the place that we have been given as our birthright. They are taking it from us day by day, and they're giving it away, not out of generosity or compassion or any of that stuff, but in order to enrich themselves further. That's why they're doing it. And there is no limit to what will happen. There is no knowing what will happen. When Africa continues to explode, and it will explode into Europe and into Ireland, everywhere, what will be left of Ireland? What will be left of Europe? Forget our Christian heritage, our Christendom, our Christian civilization. That's gone. But can we at least protect our freedoms? Can we at least protect our culture to the extent that we have one left? And perhaps possibly downstream to resuscitate it and restore in our children and our children's children a love for their country, because that was taken away by a pincer movement of cynical postmodern culture of Marxism and Provoism in effect. That pincer movement destroyed the hope that we might have had that our children would grow up loving their country and feeling their country. Now we have to re-educate them in that. We have to take back the levers of our countries, our country, from those who are intent upon driving it over the cliff, indifferent to what will happen to everybody who is on that ship. So I think we're very close to the end. But this is our last chance.
We are very close. But I would say, and you know, there's very few of us speaking out against it. There's lots of anonymous people speaking out on social media, but those of us who are speaking out are, you know, we're taking. You said to me today earlier, you know, about, well, you could just go off onto the golf course for the next 20, 30 years or whatever, and just shield yourself. Not that I play golf. I hate it.
I don't play golf either.
No, I know you don't. But I mean, you know, we
hate golf.
Like John, I mean, you and I are lucky because we both ended up, I, as a result of being unlawfully dismissed, have, thanks to Dennis O'Brien, I am in a fortunate position. I don't need to be doing any of this. I could walk away from this tomorrow. I am not burdened, thankfully, and I am not in the under the control of any bank, and that's a very unusual situation. You're in the same boat, because we spoke out against what the mainstream media were doing, and as a result of that, now we are in the very fortunate position where we could walk away. We're not burdened financially, but we have made a decision to stay, to fight for our country. However, we need support, and I'm not talking about financial support. Those of us who are speaking out, I know that there are many, 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 many hundreds of thousands of Irish people who feel the same way. But it is time that they came forward and started to really defend what is left of our country. Yes. And that means taking practical action. It means not paying your TV license. It means stop buying the Irish Times, the Independent, supporting Dennis O'Brien. Don't go to the Beacon Hospital. Don't support globalism. Choose where you're going to do your shopping. All of these small actions, so easily done, yes, will help save Ireland. Yes. We have a diaspora in America of 60 million people, many of whom have a close affiliation with Ireland. At least in the Ireland of their dreams is the one that, the green fields, the one that the friendly people, the things that only Irish people understand about Ireland, in the same way only Spanish people understand about their country. Yes. And we have a huge population all around the world that would like to protect their homeland, even if they never make it back here, but they love Ireland. Yes. Well, so we can save Ireland, John.
Well, can I just say, from my own point of view, to reiterate from my perspective what you just said, I mean, I left journalism 4 years ago in Irish journalism. I had a choice. I could have stayed and put up with this filth and put up with the bullying and the lying that journalists do every day, as a matter of course, and just lie after lie after lie, and bigger lies and bigger lies and bigger lies to win referendums and so on. And long story, we'll fight that in another forum very soon, I hope. But I had a choice. I had a choice. I could have stayed. I turned down a pretty good income. I walked away from it because I couldn't tolerate this, and I saw what it was doing to my country. And I don't want. I'm so happy to be here with you, Gemma. We're not being paid, nor do we want to be paid to do this work. If work it is, we are here, as you say, because we lived in this country all our lives and we love it, and we want to protect it, and we want to save it for the next generation and the generation after that. And we wanted people to look back on, insofar as they will remember our names at all, that they will remember us for one thing, that we continue to speak the truth to power and to evil, to the last of our hours and the last of our days. That's all I care about. And to inspire people to the extent that we can, in our humble way, to speak out themselves, as you say, in small ways, but also in big ways. People can actually, there is such a thing as people power. We saw this in 1989 in Eastern Europe, when people, the Berlin Wall was torn to shreds, and people came on, 1 million people onto the streets of Prague, electing Václav Havel, one of the greatest men of the last century. And we have an extraordinary country. This is such a beautiful country in so many ways. Such a rich culture that most of us don't, to our shame, don't even know the quarter of it. But we can learn, even though we're old, we can still learn about more and more about our country. But God Almighty, we have to get it back now. It's almost gone. Like this thing, the removal men are moving our furniture out, even at this moment, and moving in other things. And that's the choice. Will we be driving past our home in a year or 10 and thinking, we used to live there? That used to be our country. I used to look at that mountain, Ben Bulben in Sligo, and think, what a beautiful mountain. That mountain belongs to me, in a sense.
Well, increasingly it will be the case. I mean, I did live in Spain for a few years, and I made a very conscious decision in my 20s to come back and give something to my country through my, whatever way I could do it. I chose journalism. And I'm not trying to, sing my own praises there, but that's what I want. I made a conscious decision to come back and live here. Well, but one of the reasons was because I love the landscape. I love the countryside, and there's very few countries that you can live in a capital city and have immediate access to the countryside. Yeah. It is now getting to a point that I feel increasingly nervous going into the countryside. And that is what is going to happen to Ireland. We have seen some incredibly violent crimes happening over the last few days, weeks, months, years. The nature of crime in Ireland is becoming a lot more violent than it ever was. And, you know, you start to feel that beautiful countryside. It's totally different for a woman than a man. But even walking around the streets now as a woman, it is a different feeling in Ireland. It's not only in Dublin that it feels different. I mean, I would think twice before going into the capital city on my own at night. I mean, I would think seriously, it was never like that. Never like that. So these are all the freedoms. We are losing these freedoms as a country.
Well, Gemma, do people not have this thought that I have all the time? When I hear about one of those horrific crimes, I won't mention the specifics, but people have been seeing them. There's one or two there in the last couple of days, and terrible, terrible things. And you see immediately the names of the people involved, and you know immediately they're not Irish people. Whether they're citizens or not, I don't know. Probably, you know, but they're not Irish people. And you think, first, in a part of me, why are they here? Why did they come here? Did they come here to impose this evil on us? Is that why they came? Why did they come here and do this? If Ireland is the place you wanted to be, and it is your heart's desire, and you have got it, and we have given you everything, why do you do this then, to besmirch our nation and our streets and spill the blood of your fellow country people or whatever, and in such horrific ways as we have seen? As you're dead right. I mean, we didn't, you know, there's a new dimension to the criminality. That
I mean, you know, migrants are poor by definition. They're poor. They're coming for a better life. Well, and it is inevitable. They come here and they say, "What? I'm never going to be able to have the dream that I thought I could have. You know, own my own house." They are living in poverty, most of them.
Well, that's a very important point.
And therefore, of course, they're going to be getting involved in crime. In the same way, poor Irish people are more inclined to get involved in crime. So it's only natural. It's an indication of how multicultural Ireland is not working because of the high crime levels among migrants. And just go into the courts any day of the week to prove that, as I've said already.
Yeah, well, you see, multiculturalism, I mean, you know, people make comparisons. Well, the United States grew out of multiculturalism. Well, yes, but the United States, you could actually make your own life. It was an open society in which opportunity existed, and in which, if you were prepared to work hard, there were rewards to be gained. But the people that are coming here are not being asked to work hard. They're just asked to come. And there's nothing for them to do, particularly in the way that we set things up, except transfer to them the resources of other people who are here already and who are already working. And that's going to create huge bitterness in our country as time goes on. You know, and you see that in other cultures when we go across and you walk around London. I mean, you know, I've been listening to this all my life. I was listening to this stuff about multicultural London, and until I actually went there and spent some serious time there about 20 years ago when my daughter was born there, and I spent a lot of time there, and I bought a house there and walked around. And in a very short time, it became clear to me that this so-called, you know, multicultural utopia was allowed to exist by the avoidance of eye contact. People just didn't look at each other. That was the way they kept safe. And I mean, I remember there was a guy, I think he was the head of somebody like the Race Relations Board or something, a black man, Trevor Phillips was his name, around that time came out and said, he absolutely said, multiculturalism doesn't work. It's a complete failure. We have to think again. That was 20 years ago in the United Kingdom. Look how things have started. And that was a black man, so he could say it, but he still got hammered for saying it. We're starting now what had failed there already. Or we're not starting, we're a couple of decades into it. But we were starting then what had failed. Blindly, in the way we do with everything, tower blocks or whatever it is. We build them when you know, they're just going out, dying out of fashion everywhere else. Like, it's time that, you see, one of the problems is that we don't any longer have a central intelligence in terms of thought in our country, because the media is corrupt. So there's no possibility of a conversation emanating from that quarter that will be true to what's happening, to the facts and the truth and the circumstances that we find ourselves in. So we have to generate that again. That's the most important thing. So in addition to what you said, people need to speak. People need to start talking. I mean, we need to get rid of this tendency we have to, sure, look at, you know, that kind of reaction you get now from people when you raise anything. You're a terrible man. You're very controversial. You know, like, we need to actually start being controversial to each other, to say to each other what we see with our two eyes in front of us in the streets, because it's there to be seen. You just walk up any street virtually in Ireland now, and it has changed radically from what it was like 20 years ago. You need to say that to people and ask them, what do you think about that? What's your feeling about what's happening to your town or your city? You know, do you have any worries about it? Because I have. Can I say to them, can I share them with you? We need to start these conversations between ourselves, because the media will not allow us to do it in a collective way. But perhaps we can do it individually. You know, society was changed before by people. We've seen that, as I said, in Eastern Europe and in other places. So there's no reason, if we find the correct channels, that we can't do it again. And what you're doing, Gemma, is so important. And you know, people like Rowan Croft and Dave Cullen and all these people, you know, who are creating very rapidly, I have to say, an alternative media. And so people should be telling their friends and their neighbours, don't watch the 9 o'clock news on RTE. Turn over to one of these channels and look at them for an hour and a half. You might learn things. You might actually be moved by something someone says. You might at least see the honesty that is there, because there is no honesty to be found in these other quarters.
Yeah, I mean, increasingly people are saying to me that they just cannot stomach RTE anymore. They can't stomach it. It physically upsets them.
Yeah.
And they know that they're being made fools of. And it's the same when they open the Irish Times or the Independent. You know, and I like, you know, we have very important elections coming up in May. And those parties, all of the political parties, bar, you know, the new parties that are developing and have national sovereignty and the protection of national sovereignty at the core of their message. So I'm not including them, but all of the other political parties in this country are pro-globalism, they're pro-mass immigration, and they're pro-multiculturalism, every single one of them.
Yes.
You have a choice in May to elect those parties. I have put out all of the brands over the last 24 hours in a recent tweet and on social media, on Facebook, all of those parties, RTE, INM, Communicore, Dennis O'Brien's Communicore, the Irish Times, etc. All of these brands are toxic. They must be eradicated. The Social Democrats, Anti-Austerity Alliance, Solidarity, People Before Profit, Fianna Fáil, Fine Gael, Labour, until such time, and Sinn Féin, obviously, until such time as we waken up and say, right, these are a very toxic influence over our sovereignty.
Okay. Yes, I agree. Can I just take people on a little journey over the last couple of elections and bring them on to the next one? This is a very important one to get your head around this. In 2011, having no alternative, we plumped for Fine Gael independent, right? You know, for better or worse. Worse it was, but that was predictable. But there was no choice. In 2016, something very interesting happened, whereas the people surveyed all the available candidates and basically came to a decision which, if you were to actually think about a singular intelligence of the electorate, was kind of an attempt to kind of create a complete paralysis of the political system. In other words, to ground them all, to paralyze them all, so that they wouldn't be able to function. That the mean, or the average response of the electorate was to say, a curse upon all your houses. I don't want to give any of you power. And it created what was really, you know, if you looked at the arithmetic of it and tried, there was no answer. I mean, immediately if you looked at it, the only thing you say, well, the best thing is call another election and say to people, look, we need you to now this time vote for a very clear alternative government. And here are the options. And that perhaps something would have shifted to create that. They didn't do that. They cobbled together this thing where virtually all the members of the Dáil were involved in cobbling together. A handful weren't, and one or two actually made something of that. There were one or two people. I pick out Matty McGrath, who's a very courageous man, and who's not afraid to go against the mobs and the consensus. But nevertheless, so here we have a government which is just putting in time, and an opposition which is just allowing it to put in time and putting in time itself. And it's not in any meaningful sense an opposition, because we have to citizens have to go out and do the job and get abused for doing the job that these guys are being paid for doing but are not doing. So now the next election, in a certain sense, at this moment in time, looks like nothing has changed. But I believe a lot is changing really, really fast on the ground. And there will be alternatives. Their exit party will be out, and you have Peadar Tobin's party will be out. I don't know how that will stack up.
Well, I don't think Peadar is. I think Peadar's, yes, he's very strong on pro-life, but I've asked him, did he support the United Nations Migration Pact, and I'm still waiting for a response from Peadar on that. So I think Peadar may, have some of the trappings of Sinn Féin left. When it comes to,
you may be right there, Gemma. You may be right. But I suppose, but there will be other factions, and maybe there. Now we have to look at this. Look what's happened across Europe. Look at Lega Nord, my friends, and I know many of these people in Lega Nord. They were a Northern Italy party up to relatively recently. They were a tiny party, and then they got into government in a very tiny way a couple of elections ago, and just on the fringes. And then they became, almost overnight, they became an all-Italy party. And this extraordinary man, Matteo Salvini, stepped forward. And I've done a number of meetings with them. Back in a few years ago, I did a lot of meetings with them, and people told them far right and all this nonsense that people before profit and these stupid organizations prate all the time. These were ordinary people. They were teachers and shopkeepers and shop workers and all kinds of ordinary people. Firemen, firewomen, police officers, whatever. They were people who were actually interested in what was happening to their country. They were getting very concerned. And when you went to their meetings, they were talking about things like the demographic crisis and about the family and about the attack on the family by LGBT mobs and so on, and all this stuff that was going on initially. So this was just, again, commonsensical stuff. And now, they're in government with the 5-Star Movement. But that's the de facto situation. If there was an election tomorrow morning, they would be elected overwhelmingly with a majority of their own. That is the popularity of Salvini. A country that used to be one of the great countries of the world. It was brought to its knees by Germany and its pals and its flunkies and its quislings in Ireland and all over the place, right? It was destroyed and convinced that it was finished and convinced that it had nothing to offer the world. One of the greatest countries the world has ever seen, Italy. So much music, art, fashion, you name it, literature, you name it. Italy is the greatest place. And now they're coming back and they're so proud and they love Matteo Salvini. He is their leader and he is their man. Now, that has inspired countries all over Europe. There's a group, a party, Vox in Spain. A few years ago, Spain was left-wing. And with all the movements, Podemos and all these groups that were coming out, they were all left-wing. They're all gone now. And Vox is going to be the Lega of Spain by the next election. So it is possible for us to do this, to take Europe back from these people and to take Ireland back from these people. And we need to do it really. We have very little time to do it. But the people are there to help us now, to inspire us, to advise us, to lead us to the extent that we will need leadership at a European level. Leadership is there now. These elections in Europe will actually transform the European Parliament. Now the European Parliament is a totally toothless organization, of course, but symbolically it will be a punch in the snot to the globalists and their compadres. And so we in Ireland need to find somewhere about our precincts a few Matteo Salvinis, a few Nigel Farages, a few of those people who are able to stand up and lead us. Because what we have lacked for so long is a leadership capable of leading, a leadership capable of saying, this is Ireland. What can we offer the world? What is our unique selling point? I don't mean just economically, I mean everywhere. Why do people love Ireland? Let us make more of this. Let us become more Irish, more Ireland. Let us have Ireland for the Irish, first of all. That this is what it is, that this belongs to the people who were born here, whose parents were born here, whose grandparents were here. Other people are welcome, sure. I'm not going to insult any person who comes to Ireland to their face. Never, never, never. But I'm not going to let them take my country away from me. Never.
Well, and we need to stress we only have a tiny little island for all of us, scattered all around the world. A tiny, tiny spot that is ours. And, other countries where people are coming from, they're coming from vast continents. But we don't have much geographically. And it is time. It is time now that we saved what we have.
Also, Gemma, can I say this? That there's a semantic incongruency in the whole thing. Because the more people you take in, you see, so far the working population of Ireland are generating a certain kind of economic activity, which in terms of the books looks fairly good now. It's very, very, very ropey, and always was. But you see, once we reach a certain tipping point of influx, that'll be wiped out. We won't be able to sustain the population that will be here, and the proportion of it that will be working will be inadequate to meet the needs of the whole. So we will wipe out everything that they are coming here for. And out of that then will come a conflagration. Mm-hmm. It will come a catastrophe beyond our wildest nightmares. Because we have seen before what happened when Ireland was planted. And the people, they set against each other, the new incomers and those who are already there, the Unionists and the Catholics. Well, This is going to be far worse. We stopped teaching this history in school. But even before that, we had stopped remembering history. But we should start paying attention, and we should start teaching our children the history, because they, unfortunately, are being usurped and being, recruited to these ideologies by these cynical politicians, because they're not educated enough. The education system, while we were asleep at the wheel, the education system was taken over by very nasty people. And has been for many years. Paulie Pearse warned us about this, and we didn't listen because we laughed at him and sneered at him and dismissed him for all those years from the 60s onwards. Now we will live to regret it. It is time for us to wake up one last time and stand up for our country.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I think on that note, we will finish this live stream. It's a very sad situation that we're in, but I'm really pleading with people now to act, to think about these elections coming up, to encourage people who you think would be suitable candidates to take on the vested interests of the political parties and put themselves forward. We're running out of time, and John, you have spelt it out very, very clearly tonight. Is there anything finally you would like to say?
Just that, the prize is great. Ireland is such a beautiful country. We have such a beautiful culture, like Italy in its own way. And Italians love Ireland, and for very good reasons. Our culture is one of the richest in the world. It's one of the most beautiful countries in the world. We had a personality as a people up to relatively recently all over, which was so attractive to outsiders. That's possibly part of our problem. The prize is worth winning. All we need to do is stand up. We can. I keep saying this. One other thing. I keep saying, think of this image. We talked about Radker earlier on. You said he's just a puppet. And of course he is a puppet. But he could actually say no. He could say no. Leo Varadkar could get out of the bed in the morning on the right side for a change and actually say, I'm going to stand up for Ireland from now on. But if he doesn't do that, we can get rid of him still. We still have that power. And I say, think about this for a prize. If we could do that, we could think about that in 5 years' time, you would be getting on a bus somewhere in Dublin and you would see Leo Varadkar sitting at the back and say, oh, I wonder where he's been the last 5 years. Wouldn't that be something to be able to say?
We can do it. We are the many, they are the few.
And Coveney and Harris and all these awful people who have insinuated themselves as our leaders. They're not fit to lead, a a herd of sheep, a flock of sheep across the road. Like, they're appalling people. We need to actually waken up and realize that they're leading us to hell.
Okay, well, on that note, I think we'll finish this evening. John, you and I are certainly going to continue fighting this fight, and we hope that people will join with us. You know, over the next few weeks, there will be some more developments along this particular front, so we'll keep you posted about them. But for this evening, thank you very much to all of our viewers who've stuck with us, and we'll be back again soon. Good evening.
Thank you.